Jasmine Crockett called out Trump and J.D. Vance on live TV with one brutal sentence. What happened next turned a viral moment into real change for America's forgotten classrooms. Nobody saw it coming, not the moderator, not the White House aides, pacing in the wings, and certainly not Vice President J.D. Vance, who was already shifting in his seat the moment Jasmine Crockett leaned forward. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The camera had just cut back to her after a long comment from Vance about bridging education gaps without bloating federal budgets. Crockett didn't flinch. She paused just long enough to make everyone in the room sit up. Then she spoke. If President Trump and Vice President Vance cared half as much about kids in struggling districts as they do about cameras and sound bites, maybe our children wouldn't still be learning in crumbling classrooms. It wasn't just a line. It was a direct punch, live, primetime, national television. The panel froze for half a second, like someone had cut the audio feed. Even the moderator blinked, unsure whether to pivot or let the silence ride. Then the murmur started. You could hear someone whisper, "Wow." Off camera, J.D. Vance blinked twice. President Trump, seated just 2 chairs down, visibly clenched his jaw before reaching for his mic. But Crockett was already done speaking. She leaned back, calm and composed. And just like that, it was everywhere. By the time the segment ended, hashtag Jasmine Crockett was trending on X, TikTok, and Facebook. Within 15 minutes, her quote had been clipped, captioned, and was spreading like wildfire through WhatsApp threads and Reddit boards. Teachers across the country started sharing it. Parents in neglected districts replayed it over dinner. Even a few student-run accounts posted it alongside clips of water-stained ceilings and outdated textbooks. Meanwhile, Trump's team went into immediate damage control mode. In a hastily arranged segment on Newsmax later that night, the president sat beside J.D. Vance and called Crockett's remarks a disgusting insult to the office and claimed she was attacking the country. J.D. tried to play it cool, but stumbled through a vague response about respecting the process. But by the next morning, the narrative had already slipped through their fingers. Most of America wasn't talking about decorum. They were talking about moldy classrooms, overcrowded schools with broken heating systems, and teachers buying their own paper. Jasmine's words had tapped into something real, something raw. She wasn't some faraway politician talking abstractly. She had struck a nerve, with precision because people knew exactly what she meant. In Detroit, a teacher shared a photo of a broken ceiling tile in her classroom and captioned it, "She's not wrong." In Bakersfield, a mother stitched Crockett's clip with a video of her son's school bathroom, 2 out of 4 stalls duct-taped shut. In Toledo, a retired principal tweeted, "Finally, someone said it on air." The administration's attempt to discredit her only fueled the fire. Every harsh word from the White House made her look stronger, more sincere, more willing to say what others wouldn't. And Crockett, she didn't take a victory lap. She went quiet, no follow-up tweet, no interviews, no statement from her office, just silence. That silence only made people lean in further. Who was this woman who had taken on the president and vice president in front of millions, then disappeared behind the curtain? But that was the strategy all along. She said what needed to be said, then let the country speak for her. But behind the scenes, something was already in motion. While social media was still catching its breath, Jasmine Crockett sat in a back room at the CNN studios in Arlington, Texas, surrounded by silence. Her team hovered nearby, 2 staffers glued to their phones, one staring at the wall, visibly overwhelmed. No one said anything at first. Then her chief of staff, Tisha Monroe, broke the quiet. "You know what you just did, right?" Jasmine looked up, peeled off the mic still clipped to her blazer, and gave a small shrug. "Yeah," she said. "I told the truth." Tisha nodded, but her fingers were already moving across her screen. Notifications were coming in faster than she could read. Clips of Jasmine's line were blowing up in education circles, celebrity accounts, even international headlines. But with that surge of attention came another flood: death threats, coordinated disinformation posts, and reporters begging for a statement. Jasmine didn't flinch. She just asked, "How's the phone line back at the district office?" Tisha looked at her. "A lot of teachers, a few mayors." Evan, a Republican rep from Pennsylvania, left a voicemail. Said he's been trying to say something similar but couldn't get airtime. Jasmine leaned back. "Good. Let them talk. It's their turn now." That night, in the small hotel room they'd rented near the studio, Jasmine Crockett didn't celebrate. She sat at the edge of her bed, flats off, blazer draped over the back of a chair, phone buzzing on the nightstand. The TV was unmuted, showing a loop of Trump and J.D. Vance's response. "This is what happens when people think they're above the presidency," Trump said on air. "She's a disgrace," J.D. added. "She's playing with fire. You can't just lob grenades on live TV and expect there not to be consequences." But Jasmine knew those weren't consequences. Those were tremors, signs that something real had shifted. Her phone lit up with a text from Mrs. Egan, Oak Ridge Elementary. "You don't know me, but I've been teaching second grade for 28 years. That one sentence tonight made me cry. Thank you. She stared at it, no emojis, no fluff, just a tired teacher, saying something that meant more than 1,000 pundit takes. The next morning, she met with her senior staff in a coffee shop in Fort Worth. They sat around a chipped wooden table in a booth near the back, trying to keep a low profile, though people were already starting to recognize her. A woman with a baby in her arms stopped to say thank you. A teenage boy wearing a school hoodie fist-bumped her on his way out. Jasmine smiled but stayed focused. "What's the plan?" asked Malik, her communications director. Jasmine didn't speak right away. She looked at the sunlight cutting across the table, then leaned forward. "We don't chase this, we guide it quietly. Let people tell their stories. We just make sure they're heard." Malik frowned. "We're getting requests from NPR, BBC, even 60 Minutes. You sure you don't want to say anything?" She shook her head. "Not yet." Her aide Leah pulled out a laptop. "We've got 38 school districts reaching out. For one to organize roundtables to invited you to visit. Send me to the ones nobody cares about," Jasmine said. "Places where they've been begging for help and nobody's listening." Tisha raised an eyebrow. "That's Dayton. That's Yuma. That's all of them." "Then we start in Ohio," Jasmine said. "That's JD's home turf. Let's see if he likes those crumbling classrooms I mentioned." They all laughed, but it wasn't the laugh of victory. It was the tired, caffeinated laugh of people who knew the storm was still building behind the curtain. Jasmine was already thinking 5 steps ahead. This wasn't about her. It was about who she was willing to stand up for, kids who'd never heard her name until last night. Teachers too tired to march but still showing up every morning. Parents who'd given up hoping for change. Let the media spin. Let Trump rage. Let JD Vance do the press rounds. Jasmine said, "I've got my boots on, my bag packed, and my schedule cleared. I'm not going to wait for someone else to lead the fight." But she didn't know that the pushback she was about to face would come from more than just politicians. By Tuesday morning, the gloves were off. The White House press office released a formal statement condemning Jasmine Crockett's comments as reckless political theater. A talking point memo circulated among conservative lawmakers, instructing them to question her credibility. Frame her as angry and hostile to unity. JD Vance went on a radio show in Cleveland and said, "Congresswoman Crockett didn't just insult the president, she insulted the American people." But the problem was, people didn't seem to feel insulted, and that only made the administration more desperate. Crockett's office was flooded not just with praise but with hate mail. Threats started pouring in through burner email addresses, most of them poorly written, some of them serious enough to be forwarded to Capitol Police. One voicemail warned, "You want to play with fire? Don't cry when it burns." Another said simply, "Sit down, girl." Tisha Monroe was the one fielding most of it. She'd heard it before, but this time felt different, louder, more coordinated. It wasn't just fringe voices. It was local officials, commentators, even a few of Crockett's colleagues, who pulled her aside in the Capitol hallways. "Just be careful, Jasmine," one Democrat whispered. "They're going to come for you now." She smiled at him, polite but unmoved. Let them come. But behind her calm, there was a growing storm. Fox News ran 3 consecutive nights of coverage, framing her quote as an attack on American institutions. Pundits accused her of grandstanding. One host asked if she even liked this country. The next morning, Crockett stood on the steps of a school in Toledo, Ohio, where she'd been invited by local teachers. Her team had debated whether she should go. Security concerns were mounting, but she insisted. "They want to scare me out of showing up," she told Malik. "That means I need to be there twice as loud." The school was a red brick building with flaking paint around the windows. The auditorium had a cracked floor. One of the science classrooms still had outdated textbooks from the early 2000s. Jasmine walked through the halls with Principal Renita Fox, who apologized for the condition of nearly everything. "I hate that you're seeing it like this," Fox said. "I'm glad I am," Jasmine replied. A teacher pulled her aside and whispered, "I've had kids faint from the heat in September. There's no AC in half the building." Outside, cameras caught Crockett hugging a child in a handmade shirt that read, "Fix our schools before you fix your image." The photo would make the front page of 5 newspapers the next day. But back in D.C., it was already becoming ammunition. That night, JD Vance went live again, this time with a more aggressive tone. "She's not here to fix education. She's campaigning on division. That's what this is about." Trump echoed the message during a rally in Des Moines. "She's part of the radical left that wants to tear down everything we built. If you love your country, you reject that nonsense." But not everyone in the party was lining up behind them. A Republican school board member in Kansas tweeted, "I don't agree with Crockett on most things, but she's not lying about those classrooms." Still, the pressure was mounting. Inside the Capitol, Jasmine walked into a closed-door education subcommittee meeting and found herself the target of not-so-subtle attacks. A congressman from Louisiana said, "Some of us are here to legislate, not go viral." She stared across the table at him. "I didn't go viral because I wanted to. I went viral because the truth doesn't care about your comfort. He looked away. The meeting adjourned without any progress, but the message was clear. Lines had been drawn. People weren't just disagreeing with her. They were angry that she'd disrupted the game. Malik vented about it later as they grabbed dinner in a cramped diner outside Capitol Hill. They don't want change. They want quiet, he said. Jasmine stirred her coffee. Then we're doing something right. But across the country, things were about to get louder than anyone expected. In the days that followed, the country did what it always does in a moment like this, it picked a side. But this time, it wasn't split clean down the middle. The divide ran deeper, cutting through communities, workplaces, families, not just between parties, but between those who had seen the inside of those classrooms and those who hadn't. A bus driver in Topeka taped Jasmine's quote to her dashboard. A group of seniors in Charleston, West Virginia, held a bake sale to raise funds for broken windows at their neighborhood school and sent her a letter with the check. Even a retired superintendent from Fresno posted a YouTube video saying, "I've been quiet for too long. She's not lying. She's late, maybe, but she's right." Still, for every voice of support, there was another trying to pull her down. Conservative talk radio framed her as another angry woman trying to burn it all down. A cable host replayed the clip 23 times in one night, each time cutting her mid-sentence to add sarcastic commentary. The attacks were exhausting, but they were also helping. Every insult gave her more visibility. Still, the volume of it all was taking a toll. At her office back in Dallas, interns worked late just to sort the mail. One box was filled entirely with notes from kids' crayon drawings, hand-scribbled letters. Some didn't even have stamps, just sticky notes handed to school counselors who mailed them on the children's behalf. One stood out. It was from a fourth grader named Braylon and a Balin. It read, "Dear Miss Crockett, I wish you were my teacher. We have mice. One ran across my desk, and the teacher screamed, 'I think you care because you said something real. Thank you.'" That letter stayed in Jasmine's purse, but while praise kept pouring in, the threats took a darker turn. One evening, while getting out of a car in Columbus, someone shouted her name from across a parking lot. Jasmine turned, only to be blinded by a camera flash. A man in a gray jacket snapped a photo, laughed, and walked off. "You good?" asked Malik. Walking a few steps behind, she nodded. "Just a reminder that folks are watching." That night, Tisha sat her down at the hotel. "Jazz, we need to talk about security," she said. The Capitol Police flagged 3 online threats. One mentioned your parents. They're escalating. Jasmine ran a hand through her hair. "I'm not hiding. I made a choice. I knew what came with it." Tisha didn't blink. "You didn't choose to be a target. They made you one." But the next morning, Crockett was back on the move. She visited a school in Erie, Pennsylvania, where 3 classes shared one set of working science equipment. A janitor showed her a boiler room that doubled as a storage closet for textbooks. It smelled of rust and mildew. Reporters were waiting outside. One asked if she was scared. "No," she said plainly. "I'm furious. And I think if you saw what I saw, you would be too." That clip hit TikTok within an hour and quickly became another moment. Across the country, the conversation shifted again. It was no longer about whether Crockett had gone too far. It was about why no one else had said it first. Podcasts started covering it. Suburban parents who'd never heard of her began asking questions. Even PTA meetings started quoting her. In Minneapolis, a group of black mothers formed a coalition called We Hear You, Jasmine. Their first video featured photos of outdated classrooms laid over Crockett's voice from the original broadcast. It got nearly 600,000 views in a day. Crockett didn't retweet it. She didn't need to dot at night. She FaceTimed her mom, who kept things simple. "You look tired, baby, but you also look like you mean it." "I do," Jasmine said, "and I'm not done." But what happened next would pull her into even deeper waters and force her to face it all in real time. They tried to talk her out of going. Malik warned her about the optics. Tisha flagged the rising security risks. Even her mother left a voicemail saying, "I know you're strong, but baby, please don't go looking for trouble." But Jasmine Crockett had already made up her mind. She was going to Dayton, not the convention center, not the polished charter school they offered to tours. She was going to the places where the need was greatest, where the voices were loudest, and where the silence had been the longest. She was going to the heart of the storm, and she was going to stand in the middle of it. Not as a politician, but as a voice for those who had been ignored for too long.